Today I'm going to continue the conversion series. This is episode 5. Today we're going to cover tables, both rollable and inline tables. So Fantasy Grounds supports the basically rollable result tables, and then it also supports an inline table. So one of the differences here, so an inline table would look something like this, where you have this formatted text in the cells in here. Not as pretty, but could be utility depending on what you're trying to do with Fantasy Grounds. And then, of course, you have the rollable tables, which are essentially more like you can, roll dice on a table and get some results out of it. So we're going to go into that, and there are some tools to make it easier for you once you learn where they're at and what they can do. So I'm going to start with the CSV importer. So what this assumes is that you know your way around, you know XML a little bit. You don't have to be a pro or anything like that. But essentially for Excel, you basically create your data depending on what you're trying to make. So for example, in this particular spreadsheet, this is a very basic one, but if you had a list of things, this would work really good for like items, let's say. I don't know about sentences so much, but I like single word items here. So on the left here is a creature type or an encounter type. And then over here on the other column is the encounter. So these are both different rows basically and columns. So if you export this file as a CSV file, it'll basically put data in here that's going to be separated by a comma. So everything here will be in a row, and then each column will be separated by a column in the data field. So I'm going to go ahead and hit File, and this assumes that you have everything sorted out into rows and columns. So that's the majority of the work. So to make this quicker for me, I actually use ChatGPT to kind of speed that up a little bit. You can sort it through Excel, but I found it was easier to essentially just kind of go through and take the elements that you need from the adventure and copy and paste those into AI program like Claude 3 or any of the AIs that are out now will help you with this. But what I did is I went through the adventure, and here is a wilderness encounter table. This is a rollable table, and I'll use that again as we progress, but I wanted to also show you an inline table. So this has the die roll and the results. Well, really, I wanted to break this down by creature type and by the actual the monster or the encounter type. So this is just a kind of an example. So I took this data and plugged this into Fantasy Grounds, and then I took that, and to put it in Fantasy Grounds, I made it a little bit easier by using ChatGPT to kind of format this so that it's easier to use. And here it kind of made some problems for me. So I didn't want these commas here because that throws off the data. So then I said, okay, I want no commas. So it just gave me this nice column list. I copied the code, and then I went straight over to Excel and pasted that in here without having to use all the sort options. It takes forever. I think just copying and pasting it from ChatGPT is a little bit quicker than trying to sort it out in Excel. You can do it in Excel. You can do filtering and such, but I just think it was a lot quicker to do it this way. Some of you might be more proficient with Excel, and it might be quicker to sort it here, but the main thing is sorting the data. That's the work. That's the part that'll take you some time. So once you have all this stuff sorted and you export it as a CSV file, there is an extension on the Fantasy Grounds Forge that Matakire wrote to convert CSV files into a table that's like an inline table with formatting. And there is a process to it. There's a tutorial video. This is a free Forge item. You can use this, for your projects if it'll make things quicker for you. It may be more work for you up front, but once you learn how to use it, it's not too bad. So I'm going to go into Fantasy Grounds, kind of show you how this works. So when we go into Fantasy Grounds, we want to make an inline table a lot quicker instead of formatting it by hand. we can use this extension. This is the CSV importer extension. And what we can do is take and put the text in that CSV file that we saved, and we can import that in. So here's some examples of something I've already done. So this is the reference manual, and then this is a basic story entry. So I could put it in a basic story entry and then copy and paste it straight over into a reference manual. It keeps all its formatting. So this is the advanced reference manual view, and this is the older basic view. So I import it into the basic area, and then when I'm done, I'll copy and paste it into the reference manual. The CSV importer used to work with the author extension and all the older reference manual. I don't think it works with this one right now. I haven't tested it yet, but just as easy just to make a kind of a story entry. Once you're done with it, you can delete it if you want. But this is just an example of the input. But basically, let's talk about how to use it. So in the story entry, I'm just going to add an item, not the advanced, but just a basic item. We're going to call this Wilderness Monster Encounters. Okay, so that's just the title. You can copy and paste it or hand type it, whatever. So here's the wilderness table. And let's see, there's that. Let me get this formatted a little bit better. Okay, so basically, the first step is you need to put a pound symbol and type the word table. And what this does is it tells Fantasy Grounds to look at this or to look for that string. So what I'm going to do is bookmark this, and the directions are that you have to close the data record. It's very important to do this. So you're going to close the data record. I'm going to open it back up because that tells Fantasy Grounds to re-look for this string. And then I will take the CSV import tool and I will bring in whatever data type. So here's my encounter type thing here. And I'll hit open. Oops, see, this is where I had problems because it was sorted with the wrong data. So it had commas in it, and that's where I got this error. So let me go back to my CSV file. Okay, so what I'm going to do is hit File, Export, and then change file type to CSV, which is the comma delimited. Save as, and I'll say encounter types 2, and then hit save. Okay, so now that I have that, let me start over. So I'm going to close this window, bring it back up, go to import CSV file, and here's the file itself. And there we go. So I had the wrong file in my clipboard, but this is how you do this. So at this time, you can also hit, I'm highlighting this first row, hitting Control B to make that bold like the header. You can use the control keys to change the width of these. You can add tables, so I'm not going to go into that part, the text formatting, but essentially this is a good starting point. And like I said earlier, if you want to put it in an advanced story record and not just this older basic one, you can click on the advanced item, do a text block, and then you could hit Control A. So that's all of this stuff. Control C and Control V. So you can copy and paste this stuff into your newer record types. I just kind of use the older record type as a staging point. You could probably use a note, whatever you want to do, but in this case, this would be that, and I would just copy over the title, do something like that. But there's an inline table, essentially. So you can either build it from scratch by adding cells and copying and pasting one at a time, or you can use Excel to sort out your data, and you can export it as a CSV file that's comma delimited, and it will basically create these cells for you automatically or somewhat automatically with the extension. So that's a helpful tool if you're going to build a lot of inline tables in Fantasy Grounds. I don't see very many people using this as much anymore because what they're starting to do is actually just copy a picture of the table instead of making it formatted like this. But if you want, Fantasy Grounds text and you want to be able to copy and paste from it, then it's better to make this kind of inline table as opposed to an image. Because if you just put a picture in there, you're not going to be able to copy and paste it very easily. So there's that. So that's how you use the inline tables. So hopefully that helps. Again, you make a new story entry. You put the hashtag and then tables and then another hashtag. You close the record and open it back up. Make sure you make a bookmark so you don't lose out on it. And then you import your CSV file, and if you formatted it correctly, it'll import like this. There's a video on it on the page, and I also will have all these resources linked at the end of the video. So if you're interested, look up CSV import tool for the Fantasy Grounds Forge. Don't get the one from the forums. Get the one on the actual Fantasy Grounds Forge. And that will help you with inline tables and make it a little bit quicker once you get familiar with the process. So that's one thing you can do. So the next thing we're going to cover is we're going to take a look at rollable tables. The only two that I'm really going to worry about is like an encounter, and then there's like a loot table. So in the adventure itself, there are some opportunities for loot and encounter. So we can make like an encounter table. So right here, this is a wilderness encounter table. So what I can do is take this information, and I only want this, I don't need the entire page. I just want this. So let me go to review, go to highlight, and this is what I want right here. So I'm going to hit copy text, and then I'll go into like ChatGPT, or you can sort it out in a different method if you want. So I'm going to hit Control V as in Victor, and what I'm going to have it do is I'm going to ask it to create a rollable list. So I'll say create a rollable list as per previous conversations and the formatted data type. So I'm asking it to just put it in a simple table format, so that, but I don't want to say table because then it's going to make the data table. I don't want that. I just want the basic information. So what I'm telling it to do, and I'll just kind of type it out now, is I'll say table name, the next row, let me put examples so it knows what I'm talking about. I've already done this, but I want to show you how I came up with it. So here's an example. There's the table name. Here's the header. So in this case, it'll be 1D20. And I'm going to use a pipe separator with a space after there. And then I'll say encounter type. And then on the next line, I'm going to give an example of the output. So I want 0, 1 with a separator, and that's going to be where the column gets made. So that separator, anything on the left of it, it's going to be on the first row. Anything on the right will be in the second row. And then we'll just say result 1, and then I'll go to the next line just to give it a couple examples of what I'm looking for the output. And result 2. So these are just, this is an example of the type of data that I'm expecting. I just want that output. I don't want anything else. So we'll see if it listens to me this time. So it's thinking, it's looking at the stuff that I've put in there, and it looks like it's making it. This will work, but I prefer that it does it in basic text, but this is the format I'm looking for. So I'm going to hit copy code, or it can be just plain text too, it doesn't matter. And then I'll go into Fantasy. Let me see if it will do plain text. Please output into plain text, because this might throw you off sometimes. Sometimes it'll make a formatted table, and I don't see, it's not doing it like I asked it to. Yep. So this is what I'm saying. You got to be careful with the data, because it will just do whatever. So I'll have to mess with it. But I've already given it good examples, so it knows what I'm after. But that's close enough. But now what I'll do is in Fantasy Grounds, I'm going to make this a rollable table, which is a basic, just a real basic table right now. So I'll go into the tables area, and I already have a group called the Lost Caverns of Tsojcanth tables. So this is the section where I'm going to be building all of the tables for this adventure. And that's the same thing with all the other data types. Whenever you make an adventure and you're doing a conversion, it's best to make your own group and then build everything in that group. Otherwise, it goes to this uncategorized section, and it may or may not get picked up when you export it. So you got to be careful with that. Or it might pick up other stuff you don't want. So this is just a kind of a way to show you how that you need to organize the information, or try to anyways. So let's go to, where did that go? What the heck happened here? Thought I had a section for it. Maybe I accidentally deleted it. But anyways, I'll just go in here and we're just going to put tables for right now. So this is the group. That's how you do it. So you add a line, you edit, and then when you're done naming it, you can just get out of the edit mode, select the table that you're going to be working in, or the group. And now at the bottom, you can add a table by size and make one manually, kind of build it, or you can use this import text, and that's what I'm going to be doing in this one. So with this here, you have a simple table, which you could use that previous data that I had for the inline table. You can use that. But if you use delimited, now you have some options here. So I'm going to use the pipe symbol because you have comma, pipe, colon, semicolon. The reason I use pipe is because there's less of that used in text. So if you have sentences that have semicolons and commas and stuff, that will throw it off. And then you have a section here that says column headers in first row. Yep. Table ranges in first column. Yep. So now that's why I had a big stickler about the formatting. So this is the format right here. I don't need this table name because that goes up here in this cell. It's kind of separate. So this is what you want the data to look like, and then this will be wilderness encounters. So that's the name of this table. So that's the data that you want it. This is exactly how you want it to look. If you have extra stuff in here, like you have an extra pipe, it'll make another column. So you don't want anything else in here that's going to throw it off. And that's why I chose a pipe, because a lot of times you'll have commas or semicolons or stuff, especially if it's a sentence. So this will be less of that. Also notice I have 2 digits, not just one. So 01, 02, that's helpful too. It makes it uniform, and then when it lines up in Fantasy Grounds, it'll actually be 0 to whatever, to the, when you get to the 2 digit. If you only put 1 there, sometimes it won't sort properly in Fantasy Grounds. It'll put 1 and 10 together, and it's kind of goofy. So you got to be careful with that. But nonetheless, Wilderness Encounters, this is the header up here on top, and on the left is the number column. So this is what this says. It says column headers in first row, table ranges in first column. So that's what this is. And this top one is the row. So we'll hit import. It should bring that in, and there we go. So that's really quick, and it doesn't take as long. Now this kind of table wouldn't be bad because you got 20 results, you just copy and paste it in if you want to do it manually. But if you have several tables to roll upon, that can be a pain in the butt. So you got to kind of be careful with that as far as what your scope is. If it's a couple little tables, who cares? Just build it manually. But if you're going to have a ton of tables where you have to import a whole bunch of them, this is the way to go, I think anyways, personally. The other thing you can do is back in the data, it'll say, you'll have some instructions here. So we can put this data in here. This is just kind of explaining what the table's for. And if you're in Fantasy Grounds, sometimes you bring up a table and you're like, what the hell is this for? So you can hit Control V on here and do that so that you got the information. And that way when you're using this, you'll know what it's for. And then on this back table for notes, we can put the footnotes here from the encounter. So we can do this. And then maybe even this piece here. So let me go to this. So this is telling us that we can expand the encounters, you know, that sort of thing, but I'll just grab this little note. So that's what all these extra fields can be used for. If you want to incorporate some of the extra stuff that comes with your, depends on the context. Now there's 3 different outputs for tables that are rollable. So this one has a chat output, which is really basic. I mean, all it does is just gives you a title. Doesn't say, you know, doesn't give you an encounter or anything. And this is an encounter table, so we're gonna have to change that about. But this is a basic list here, is all this is. Now, in order to build this, you're gonna have to grab encounters and build them ahead of time. So that's going to be another thing that I'll cover in another episode where you build encounters. But I believe I have an encounter that we can link here. So if we go to encounters, here's the border patrol. So that's the first one here. And I'm just going to drag and drop that onto here. So that is just going to roll this, when I roll a 1, essentially, this is going to bring this encounter up. And then we want to change the output to encounter, because this is an encounter type. So I'm going to force this roll by going into the, I'm going to basically go into the settings and change this to manual entry. So let's roll, and then I'm going to type a 1 in here so we can force the result. And there's our border patrol, just like that. And then we can add it to the quick map at this point, or we can add it to the tracker. So it's kind of up to you how you want to do this, but that's pretty big. That's a pretty big encounter. But nonetheless, there you go. That's kind of how that would work on a base level. You can do a lot more fancy stuff, like, for instance, like this mountain dwarf is just a band of mountain dwarfs, so it could be any number of sizes depending on how you want to do it. Let's say you wanted a giant snake. So if I go into, if I make an encounter with a giant snake, then I can multiply it too. So it isn't just stuck on just 1 or 2 instances. You can actually multiply these things. You can do all kinds of cool stuff with it. So let me go back to my notes. Let's talk about that. All right, so in the tables themselves, you can do like 2x and call upon another table. So you can nest tables together. So the syntax would be like you'd have another row or column. In this case, it would be a column. And then you could say secondary, or even a loot table or something like that. But we can just say second encounter. Maybe this would have a boss or something in it. And then you could basically add another table name with the square brackets. So these square brackets will give you the call up for another table. So if you wanted, let's just say loot table or something, or loot chance, we'll call it. This is a chance to have loot. So if it rolls on this table, it will roll to see how much of the loot you would get. Something like that. So that's a way that you can nest tables. And there's different formatting. We'll say loot chance. And then you'd build another table called loot chance. And it has to have that exact spelling. You can't misspell it, or it can't be different than what's called out here. So it's important that you have this call out the correct table name in order to roll on it. Also, the output is different too. So this may not be a good use for a loot table because this is just a loot chance. But if you were going to have an encounter output and then you got this other table rolling on a loot table that might dead end on you because it's a different output type. So it's probably better to have loot as a separate table and maybe even a separate series of nested tables, because you don't want to have it output the an encounter, a parcel, and all those things all at once. It doesn't work that way. The only way you could do that is by going into the story entries and go to this template and make your own story template. And this way you can roll on several tables at once. That makes it a lot cleaner, and it doesn't interfere with the rolling. It's a way that you can kind of nest more table types and different types and reference different columns and all kinds of fancy stuff. But I wanted to show you the import tool, and I do want to go over a little bit of the differences in the types of tables that you can generate. Really, though, the main thing is like, this is just a simple table with encounters. So that's all I would need for this. There isn't a whole lot of need to go into too much more depth, because this is just 12 wolves and 2 wolf wares. So I just build that encounter in Fantasy Grounds. Not a big deal. But when you start getting into like loot tables and stuff, it can get a little bit more complex. So it depends on what the loot is and what it's giving you. So there's that. Also, if you've been following for the Lost Mines of Tsojcanth, or Lost Caverns of Tsojcanth, there's a pre-release that just came out on the D&D Beyond website, and that is it's kind of a free adventure. That's a preview for the full adventure, which is going to come out in July. But there is like a one-shot version, kind of like a tournament version. But this actual PDF here is the full adventure. And the one that you're getting on D&D Beyond is already converted to 5th edition, but it's only like half of the adventure. You only get the lesser caverns. You don't get the exploration leading up to the Lost Cavern and the lore that comes with it. You get a little, but not much. And then you're kind of missing out on the whole second half of the adventure. So it was more designed to run it at a convention with 4 or 5 people for like 4 hours. And there's like a scoring mechanism where if you defeat certain monsters and end up in certain areas, then you'll get a certain amount of loot, which gives you points. So there's just all kinds of interesting things that are coming up in that. What is it? The Infinite Staircase, I guess, is the name of it. And it's a lot like, if you want to compare it to, what is that? The Yawning Portal. But it just has like 6 classic adventures. I think Beyond Barrier Peaks is in there. Pharaoh is in there. There's some other, I think the land, or I don't know. I don't remember all the names, but you'll have to go and look that up. But, oh, this will be fun, the Labyrinth. But anyway, so the key is the formatting of the text. So when you're getting text like this out of a PDF, it's not going to look pretty. It's going to actually be pretty messed up. Let me see if I can pull up an example of what I'm saying here. So this is what it looked like when I first copy and paste it over. It's a mess. So that's why I use this ChatGPT to sort it out. And that's important, that you have that understanding that you need to have it to where it's going to be formatted correctly. Let's see. So I wanted to talk about these table types. So when you're using tables, especially for the formatting for it, this particular example will invoke multiple encounters based off that table. So in other words, if you have a table called Goblin Encampment, it'll roll on that table that many times. So 2x Goblin Encampment, so it'll roll twice. If you have a treasure hoard and you want it to roll on that table and you wanted a multiplier, you could do something like that. You can do like 1d4 with the square brackets around it plus 2. And it would work better with like an encounter, you could say 1d4 plus 2 goblins. and you'd have the link for the goblins there, and it would roll that many and build the encounter to that size. For actual treasure, though, you can go like 3d6 gold, and you can do something like 1d8 silver with the brackets around it, and that's a multiplier. Or you can do 1d8 times, and then you could say how many potions you have or whatever. So that's doable in Fantasy Grounds using tables. So you would set the output to a parcel if you want it to turn into treasure. And then it would build that based off of your results. So let's do a simple table. That's really just going to be a couple things. So go to tables. This one is going to be like a loot table. So I'll just build this one by hand. So I guess I'll do 4 rows, 2 steps. There we go. So this is basically going to be a loot table. And all you have to remember is the formatting. So this is going to say loot. This is 1 through 8 here. So what we'll do is we'll say this is going to be with the square brackets, 3d6, and then we'll just say GP. So that's gold. The next one will be silver. So you can use that, and we'll do 2d8 silver. You can also do something like, let's see, we'll do 1d4, 1d4 plus 1. We'll say copper. And then this last one could be 2x and then a name of a table. We'll just say mundane items. And you have to have the table built for that. So it will roll on that table. But basically, you want to change the output to parcel. And once you do that, when you roll on this table, it'll output whatever you... Oops, I forgot to turn that off. So going back into settings, turning off the manual entry. Okay, let's try it again. There we go. So yeah, so it made a loot table, and you get 2 mundane items. The reason it didn't create it because I don't have the table. So I didn't build the table called mundane items. But if you have like a source book such as the Dungeon Master's Guide, it has a lot of tables in it. That's probably the best use of that book, as a matter of fact, because most people hardly use it, I think, in most cases. But if I go to my go to the modules library and you turn on the Dungeon Master's Guide, it's got a ton of tables already made, so you don't have to reinvent the wheel a lot of times if you do if you already have books that are available to you. So here's the Dungeon Master's Guide for that. And then when you go into the tables, you'll be able to see more options available to you. So here's some tables. So I think there is one called mundane tables. But nonetheless, there's a lot. I think it's towards the end. Yeah, here's a treasure table. So is there one called mundane? No. But you can see there's treasure table, magic item table A. So you can call on this table in here and reference it, and it will roll on this table. So there's already tables set up in some campaigns and adventures that you can kind of piggyback off of if you want, or you can completely build your own. I think if you're making your own homebrew tables, you're probably going to end up using a lot of your own stuff, but if you're in a hurry or you don't want to rebuild a bunch of tables, just use the one out of the DM's guide. It's kind of has some guidance as to what tier, that sort of thing, but that's just a way that you can kind of shorten it. So I'm going to roll on this again and see what we get. So this one gave us 13 silver. So it rolled between 3 and 4. You can also weigh the tables. So if you only want it to roll on this table barely, but on all the rest of the tables more, you can change the number ranges so you can weight the tables if you want. So this just depends on what your needs are. But as far as the conversion goes, this particular adventure, doesn't really have a ton of that, so I won't be spending a ton of time converting tables. There's just a few encounter tables and like a few loot tables. And if you're going to use the D&D Beyond from the from Wizards of the Coast, from the I'm trying to think of the portal, D&D Beyond. It will have stuff like that, but there's not that many, so you don't have to worry about building a bunch of tables. But there's a little bit of work in this. I mean, if you have the time to do it, then you can build it yourself. But you can, like, some of this stuff may not be as cut and dry, or maybe it doesn't exist in some of your books, so you might have to build the stat blocks for this. But essentially, I'm going to make a list of all the creatures in here, and then I'm going to look through the SRD to see if any of these exist. And if not, then I'm going to have to build all of these from scratch. And I can convert these from 1st to 5th edition first, and then put them in, or look for the equivalents and make copies of those in Fantasy Grounds, because some of these do exist. But some of these don't. Like, I don't think this I don't know. There's a couple in here I don't recognize that, or haven't seen in a long time. Like, I don't know if this guy is in any of the books, or at least that I remember. I know the Darrow are. But there's a few in here that you probably have to make. Like Dracolisk looks familiar. The Gorgamera, I don't know if that's already in there. Margoyle. So there's a lot of monsters in here that I haven't seen in years. I know the Pesh isn't in normal things, but that's one you have to build. But these are what you're going to encounter a lot in the upper levels. But you can see there's a bit of work here with all the NPCs. They included a bunch in this book, which is amazing, because if you didn't have back then, if you didn't have the player's handbook, this would have been really helpful. And you even got spells and stuff in here. So that's very useful, and it keeps the books down. So if you don't want to carry 50,000 books back in the day, like when you used to lug it around in a backpack or whatever, that was a lot. I had a duffel bag full of books. So the duffel bag weighed like 100 pounds, man. I swear to God, I was lugging that thing around to all my friends' houses, setting up. Took me like, half an hour to get all the books out, laid out. And then I had like 2 or 3 copies of the player's handbook. I had a couple like beat up ones that I let my players use. And I was very meticulous with my books, but, from lugging it around in that damn backpack, all the corners got mungulated, and, it was just a nightmare. But see, here you got all this stuff too that you can make tables out of, which could be those inline tables. So this would be nice to have in a nicer format in Fantasy Grounds, so you don't have to. Yeah, you could copy this information, this whole page, and make it like an image and have it look old school and just paste it into the reference manual. But in this case, I'd probably want something that at least has a link to the encounters or to the monsters, I think. I don't know. It might not be worth the effort, but here's a handout, so you might make your own, like maybe make this fancier in your own typing, or maybe you want to use like an AI program, or use your Word program to make something fancier. This is graven glyphs, and maybe you want to make this look like, parchment paper. You can do all kinds of cool stuff, but essentially kind of getting off topic. But basically, we covered the inline tables. There's a tool, we said, that you can use that's on the Fantasy Grounds Forge. This is the CVS or CSV Table Importer Tool, and there's a video that shows you how to use it. And then it's pretty straightforward. You just use this little syntax here. You create a new story entry, the old kind, the basic. You type this in here at the bottom, somewhere in the body of the text. Close it, open it, and then you import your CSV file, which comes from Excel. And then you have the import tool that's built into Fantasy Grounds, and I think most rule sets support this, so it isn't just D&D, but you can import using the import tool. As long as you format it properly, it's going to come out right. That's the biggest part, or the biggest challenge, the work involved, is getting that data to look presentable for the parsing tool. Otherwise, it's not going to import it correctly. And one of the tips is, just get a decent text editor or use ChatGPT or whatever you got to do to make that text formatted nicely. Because a lot of times when you get it off a web page or a PDF, it's got extra spaces and a bunch of weirdness, weird characters and all kinds of stuff. You're going to really start seeing the quality of how these things. You're going to start seeing quality issues when you come into using PDFs and web pages. Is you'll see all kinds of weirdness, like stuff that people did just to make it work. So, anyways, this is just some work that I'm doing here. Let's see. So here's the adventure. So this is just kind of a content that you're going to want to format into the correct type of formatting. So this is the initial information I was getting out of the PDF. And it was taking it and making this so I can turn it into a CSV file and then paste it into Excel. Because this was how messy it was when you first try to open it. So it's kind of a way to make things a little bit simpler for yourselves. Like here's some treasure hoards. So to make this easier to copy and paste this in, I could do that, using the import tool. So this wouldn't be too bad, but this is not an inline table, but this would be a, let's see what this looks like. So we can go back into the loot tables. Here's the list here. And what I'm seeing here is, let's see, I don't know if I need that extra space in there or not, but we'll say loot table. And we'll see if this actually imports properly, because it looks kind of messed up. Like maybe it might work. We'll see. So it's got all the options on there. Hit import. Yeah, so it kind of jacked it up. Like it's because, let's see, what went wrong here. It mostly did what I wanted it to, but it, like I said, see, it's messed up because of this first number. So that's kind of what you got to look out for. So let me paste that back in there and see what's wrong. Oh yeah, so the 00, we want that 00 hyphen 00. And then I think that's what threw it off, was that. And then it had an extra space in there, which I don't think it needed. So let's see if that helps. Yeah, kind of. Yeah, it's still kind of jacked up, but it has to do with the formatting and the way that the text is laid out. That has a lot to do with it. So when you're doing this copying and pasting and making tables, you got to make sure the data is correct, the actual syntax. This would be pretty easy to fix. I would just put 00 on here. Oops. I don't know why it's not letting me do that, but basically that should be 0000. I don't know why it's not accepting it. Anyway, so this is just a, when to roll 100, it's 00. So I'm not sure why it's not letting me put that in there, but you get the idea that if you don't have it formatted properly, it's going to give you grief. So just kind of giving you a heads up on that. Now, I'm going to be real with you. This can be really frustrating. So you've got to kind of get used to all the little shenanigans that go on when you're working with these tools and you're trying to, make your process and your proficiency kind of better when you're making content. So you can really get yourself into a bind without the correct formatting or the correct planning and the tools and stuff. So there's a lot to this. Like you're getting used to how PDFs are formatted. You're getting used to third-party tools like, text editors and Adobe and everything else. And then you got Fantasy Grounds itself that you're dealing with. So if you've never done this before, learn how the content works in Fantasy Grounds and then start building it, because you can make copies. You don't have to actually reinvent the wheel. Like if I wanted to do this encounter again, I can just drag it back in, make a copy of it. There's a copy, crack it open, and edit it as I need to. So you don't have to use these third-party import tools. You can build everything in Fantasy Grounds. But it just sometimes takes longer. And once you realize the limitations and the capabilities of Fantasy Grounds, then start letting loose on all these extras that I'm showing you. Like the CSV table import tool, or using the inline, or using this import tool here for the tables. So it's just kind of the more or less, I want to say the biggest takeaway other than the tools is the text formatting. That's the biggest thing, because without that formatting proper, it's going to really give you a lot of problems. So let me go back to this. So part of the reason it jacked this up is because I copied the text here instead of hitting copy code. So that had something to do with it. So let me see if that helps at all. So I'm going to go like that, and then -00, and then I'll just say loot table. So this might be cleaner, but what I think is going on here is all these spaces and stuff are kind of messing it up. I don't think it needs all these extra spaces. I think that's one reason why it's getting jacked up. There we go. We'll see if that helps. So, yep, everything is in there. We don't have any weird commas or anything. Yeah, it still did that. I don't know why it's not accepting 00, because that's an important thing. It's got to be a, let's see, if I change this. Oh, you know what? I'm going to put custom dice in here. Let's see, instead of 2d10, I want to right click. Where's percentage at? Oh, I see. I don't even have the percentage dice open yet. So that's D100. And that's right. I got it in there. And that one's a D10. Okay, so this is D100. All right, so sometimes you'll have to drag the dice into the custom column. There we go. So there's, let me see if that helps. No, it's still not quite there. But anyway, so that's, I'll have to look into that. Maybe that's a new bug I just found, but it wasn't letting me create 100, which is important. Let me type 100. Let's see if that does anything. Yeah, it might. See, it fixes it there, but I don't know if you're ever going to be able to roll 100. Let me try that out. So let's go to, I'm going to go back into the settings, the options, and go back to manual dice entry. And then I'm just going to force the roll. And I'm going to type 100 in here and see if it takes that. Yep. So that's what it was. Instead of 00, I just needed to type in 100. Okay, so lesson learned there. So you need the 100 in there for a 1D100 roll. So that makes sense. All right, so there we go. So there, hopefully that helps a little bit. I know it's kind of jumping around and trailing off and going into different directions, but the real takeaway here is that you look through your adventure, find out how many tables you're going to need, and if you're going to want to expand on them at all, and then go in and start organizing the text if there are any tables. Like this one doesn't have a ton, which I'm kind of glad in a way. Tables aren't bad though if you can get them formatted. That's the real deal there. If you can get it formatted to the format you need, that's going to be huge. After that, it's pretty much downhill from there. The main thing is copying and pasting it. You can use a text editor like Notepad++. You can use something like this to sort it out too. So let me see if I can. Yeah, see, this is what you'd want it to look like. And I guess I want to change that to 100. But this is kind of the formatting that you want to see when you copy and paste your text. And that looks pretty good, right? But when you do it with the regular copy and paste function, Let me go back to that table and see if I can show you what that looks like, because it's going to be a mess. You're almost better off just putting it in like, well, if you're comfortable with Excel, that would help with numbers and just like one item things. But if it's like a bunch of paragraphs and sentences, that might be a pain in the butt. That might just be retyping everything, which sucks. All right, so let's see if what this looks like. So I'm going to copy this data here and go back into Notepad++ and see what that looks like. Yeah, see, that's what I'm saying. That's not going to be good for the parsing tool. You're going to have to fix that. So repairing and updating and kind of cleaning up your tables is going to be the nightmare. In this case, I think I would use Excel. I would just do the numbers and then the encounters, because this is too much work for just a small table. And that's also why I use ChatGPT in this case, because I didn't want to deal with that. I just like, you know what? I'm not sitting here monkeying around with this text all day. I'm gonna cheat here. I'm gonna use something like this because it's gonna format it for me. I don't have to deal with that and just copy the code. That's simple. So I guess this is a good use for ChatGPT. Like a lot of people are griping and bitching and fighting over, making images and stuff. But doing stuff like this, I could see this is valuable to me, because this would save me a lot of time. Like you can see, this is a mess. So, getting tools to help you build your content is really what this whole series is about. This is episode 5. So I think the next episode is I'm going to do the maps, and I've kind of already got a start on them. So when we do that episode, it won't be as messy as this one, but basically I took the time and converted the maps and, did the extra work behind the scenes. But that's the stuff you guys need to see. So I'm going to go through that stuff too, because a lot of times when you see these videos, you have somebody that already has everything done. And it's like, yeah, that looks great and everything, but how in the hell did you do that? And that's kind of why I'm doing these, and why these are longer videos, because a lot of times they skip over all that stuff, and that's the annoying crap. That's the stuff you need to know about. So anyways, guys, you have a good weekend. I'll see you next time, and episode 6, we'll work on some math.